A Journey Through the Book of Job, a chapter-level exploration. Part 1. The Heavenly Trial and Initial Losses, chapters 1 to 2. Chapter 1. Job is introduced as a blameless, upright man in the land of Uz who fears God and shuns evil. In a heavenly council, Satan challenges Job's motives, claiming he only serves God for his prosperity, leading God to permit the loss of Job's wealth and all 10 children, to which Job responds by worshipping and blessing the name of the Lord. Chapter 2. In a second heavenly council, Satan afflicts Job with painful boils from head to toe. Sitting in ashes and scraping himself with a potsherd, Job rejects his wife's advice to curse God and die, and receives 3 friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, who sit with him in absolute silence for 7 days. Part 2. The Dialogues of Job and his 3 friends, chapters 3 to 27. Chapter 3. Job breaks his silence with a bitter lament, cursing the day of his birth and wishing he had never been born to experience such misery. Chapter 4. Eliphaz speaks first, arguing that the innocent never perish, and suggesting that Job must have sinned to reap such suffering. Chapter 5. Eliphaz continues his speech, urging Job to accept God's discipline and promising restoration if he repents. Chapter 6. Job responds to Eliphaz, defending the bitterness of his complaints as justified by the heavy weight of his suffering and accusing his friends of being unfaithful like a dry brook. Job continues his reply, lamenting the short, hard nature of human life directly to God and asking why God will not simply pardon his supposed transgression. Chapter 8. Bildad speaks next, asserting that God is never unjust and claiming that Job's children must have sinned to die, urging Job to seek God earnestly. Chapter 9. Job answers Bildad, acknowledging God's immense power and wisdom, but arguing that a mere human cannot win a legal dispute with God because God destroys both the blameless and the wicked. Chapter 10. Job bitterly complains to God about his creation and preservation of him, only to torment him, pleading for a brief respite before he dies. Chapter 11. Zophar speaks third, rebuking Job for his loquacious defense of his innocence, asserting that God's wisdom is unfathomable, and telling Job to put away sin so he can feel secure again. Chapter 12. Job replies to all 3 friends, sarcastically noting that wisdom will not die with them, and pointing out that wild animals and nature understand God's sovereignty just as well as they do. Chapter 13. Job declares his desire to argue his case directly with the Almighty, rebukes his friends for whitewashing the truth with worthless arguments, and asks God to let him state his case without terror. Chapter 14. Job reflects on the frailty of human life, noting that trees can sprout again after being cut down, but man dies and lies down with no earthly hope of returning. Chapter 15. Eliphaz begins the second cycle of speeches, accusing Job of a lack of piety, arguing that wisdom belongs to the ancients, and describing the miserable fate of the wicked. Chapter 16. Job responds, calling his friends miserable comforters, appealing to heaven where he claims his witness and advocate resides, and maintaining his physical innocence. Chapter 17. Job continues his lament, stating that his spirit is broken, his days are numbered, and that his friends treat darkness as light. Chapter 18. Bildad launches the second cycle for his group, harshly attacking Job, describing the terrifying traps, darkness, and utter destruction that await the wicked man. Chapter 19. Job answers, expressing deep anguish over being alienated from his family and friends, but making his famous declaration of faith, "I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand upon the earth." Chapter 20. Zophar delivers his final speech, driven by agitation, describing how the wealth of the wicked will be vomited up, and how God's wrath will completely consume them. Chapter 21. Job challenges the friend's premise directly, arguing that the wicked actually live long, prosperous lives, grow old, and die in peace, proving that retribution does not neatly happen in this life. Chapter 22. Eliphaz begins the third cycle of speeches, falsely accusing Job of specific, oppressive sins, such as withholding water from the weary and stripping clothing from the naked, and urging him to return to the Almighty. Chapter 23. Job responds, longing to find where God lives so he can present his case face to face, but noting that when he looks east, west, north, or south, he cannot find him, though God knows the way he takes. Chapter 24. Job questions why God does not set times for judgment, noting how murderers, thieves, and oppressors go about unpunished, while the poor suffer under exploitation. Chapter 25. Bildad gives a very brief final speech, emphasizing the absolute majesty and dominion of God, and asking how a mortal man can be righteous before him. Chapter 26. Job sarcastically mocks Bildad's unhelpful help, then bursts into a magnificent hymn describing God's awesome power over the underworld, the skies, and the churning ocean. Chapter 27. Job delivers his final formal discourse, taking a solemn oath before God that as long as he lives, he will maintain his integrity and never admit to wickedness he did not commit. Part 3. Interlude on Wisdom and Job's Final Defense. Chapters 28 to 31. Chapter 28. A lyrical wisdom poem interrupts the text, comparing the human ability to mine precious metals and gems from the earth's depths with the elusiveness of true wisdom, which belongs exclusively to God, who declares that fearing the Lord and shunning evil is true wisdom. Chapter 29. Job looks back with profound sorrow to his past golden days, when he sat respected as a judge in the city gate, rescued the poor, and wore righteousness like a garment. Chapter 30. Job contrasts his former honor with his current wretched state, lamenting that even the lowest outcasts now mock, spit upon, and deride him, while God remains silent to his cries. Chapter 31. Job delivers his final comprehensive defense, often called his oath of clearance, calling down curses upon himself if he has practiced falsehood, adultery, injustice to servants, greed, idolatry, or malice, and challenging the Almighty to sign his defense. Part 4. Elihu's speeches and God's response, chapters 32 to 41. Chapter 32. Elihu steps forward, burning with anger both at Job for justifying himself over God, and at the three friends because they could not refute Job, yet continued to condemn him. Chapter 33. Elihu addresses Job directly, defending God's justice, explaining that God speaks to humans through dreams, visions, and physical pain to rescue them from pride and destruction. Chapter 34. Elihu argues before the wise men that God never does wickedly, that he repays every person according to their deeds, and that Job has spoken without knowledge. Chapter 35. Elihu asserts that human righteousness or sin does not add to or subtract from God, and claims that people cry out in distress without receiving answers because they cry out with pride. Chapter 36. Elihu extols God's mighty power, explaining that God uses suffering to instruct people, turn them away from iniquity, and command them to repent. Chapter 37. Elihu concludes his speech by describing the terrifying majesty of God in natural storms, thunder, lightning, and winter weather, warning Job to stand in awe of a God no human mind can comprehend. Chapter 38. Out of a violent whirlwind, the Lord answers Job with a series of unanswerable rhetorical questions about laying the earth's foundations, commanding the morning, confining the seas, and directing the stars. Chapter 39. God continues his questioning, challenging Job regarding his control over wild animals, including mountain goats, deer, wild donkeys, the wild ox, the ostrich, the warhorse, and the hawk. Chapter 40. The Lord challenges Job to reply. Job confesses his unworthiness and covers his mouth, after which God speaks again, challenging Job to test his own power and introducing the massive, grass-eating creature, Behemoth. God describes the terrifying sea monster, Leviathan, demonstrating that if humans cannot stand before or tame these created beasts, no one can possibly stand against or judge the Creator. Part 5. Restoration and Vindication. Chapter 42. Chapter 42. Job humbles himself completely, repenting in dust and ashes. God rebukes Eliphaz and his two friends for speaking wrongly about him, commands them to offer a burnt offering with Job as their intercessor, and restores Job's fortunes, giving him twice as much wealth, new children, and a long, peaceful life. Epilogue. The Book of Job transitions from the historical books into the poetic wisdom literature, exploring the profound mystery of innocent human suffering, divine sovereignty, and human limitations through a dramatic dialogue between a righteous man and his skeptical friends.